You've met them before. The one who felt like they already knew you. The one who looked at you, and it felt like coming home. They said the right things. They moved in rhythm with your soul. They finished your thoughts. They understood your wounds without you explaining them. It felt divine, fated, like you'd finally been found. But then, they vanished. No warning, no reason, just gone. And you stood there, heart half open, trying to make sense of it. Was it real? Did they lie? Did you imagine it all? Because no one can connect that deeply and disappear that fast, unless it was never real, right? But here's the truth. They don't tell you. It was real, just not in the way you thought. It wasn't soul recognition. It was reflection. They weren't connecting with you. They were copying you. They mirrored you so perfectly because they study people, not consciously, not like a plan, but like a survival mechanism. They need to be what you need. It's how they feel safe. They build trust by reflecting your light. They create closeness by becoming your echo. That's why you felt seen. You were. You just weren't loved. You were observed. They watch. They learn. They adapt. They absorb your humor, your beliefs, your language. They reflect your softness, your depth, your empathy. They use your heart as their map because they don't have one. They trust themselves. When you met them, you didn't just meet a person. You met a mirror, and mirrors are powerful. They don't give light. They show you your own. That's why it felt magnetic, because it was you, looking back at yourself, your compassion, your patience, your hope, all shining from someone else's face. They mirror you because it's the only way. They know how to connect. It's not love, it's imitation, a mimicry of emotion, a performance of intimacy. And the more you open up, the more they collect. They remember your stories, your fears, your dreams, because those become the blueprint for who they pretend to be. And then, the moment you start to feel safe, they disappear because the mask can't hold forever, because real intimacy requires authenticity, and authenticity is what they fear most. You think they abandoned you, but really, they escaped exposure. You were starting to see the cracks, the inconsistencies, the rehearsed empathy, the shallow comfort. And to them, being seen is the ultimate threat. So they vanish, not because you weren't enough, but because you saw too much. This is what confuses you. You replay every detail, trying to figure out what changed. You didn't do anything wrong. You just became real. And realness breaks the illusion. They can't sustain depth because depth exposes emptiness. So instead of growing, they flee. That's why they move fast, why everything feels accelerated. They rush connection to skip vulnerability. They use intensity to mimic intimacy. They say things like, "I've never felt this before," or "You understand me better than anyone." It sounds romantic, but it's not love. It's strategy. Because as long as you're emotional, you're not logical. They don't bond through truth. They bond through chemistry, through chaos, through the thrill of reflection. And once you're attached, their job is done. The performance ends. The curtain drops. And you're left, trying to resuscitate something that was never breathing on its own. But listen, this isn't about blame. Most of them don't even know they're doing it. They just repeat what once kept them safe. Maybe they grew up unseen. Maybe they learned early that love meant performance. That connection meant copying. That being themselves was never enough. So they became who others wanted them to be. And the problem is, they don't know how to stop. You didn't fall for a lie. You fell for potential, for the reflection of what could be real if they ever learned to stay as themselves. You fell in love with the version of them that only existed in your light. So don't blame yourself for believing it. Anyone who loves deeply would, because empathy sees essence, even when it's hidden. You weren't naive. You were real, and real love will always believe in what's possible, even when others can only perform it. But remember this, just because someone reflects your light doesn't mean they can hold it. Not everyone who sees you is capable of keeping you, and not everyone who mirrors you is meant to meet you. Sometimes the reflection is only there to show you what you look like when you're finally awake. When they disappear, it's not rejection, it's retreat, a silent collapse back into the emptiness they've been running from. You might think they moved on, found someone new, forgot you, but in truth, they're haunted, not by you, but by themselves. Because when you showed them authentic connection, you woke something they've worked their whole life to bury. They don't hate you. They hate what being with you makes them feel seen, exposed, vulnerable. And for someone who's built their identity around control, that's unbearable. They mirror you to be adored, but they disappear to survive. They can't stay where they can't hide, and love doesn't let them hide. It's not that they didn't care, it's that they can't care consistently, because real care requires self-awareness, and awareness is what they run from. Every time they get close, the mask starts to crack, and behind it, they don't know who they are. So they panic, pull away, blame you for the discomfort you didn't cause. They might say things like, "You're too much," or "I just need space," or "I can't give you what you want." But what they mean is, "You're making me feel real, and I don't know how to exist there." They disappear because being loved by you forces them to face the parts of themselves they've avoided for years. Your consistency highlights their chaos. Your openness exposes their walls. Your depth reveals their emptiness. You become a mirror too, one they can't stand to look at. So they leave, abruptly, coldly, without closure, because closure would mean accountability, and accountability would mean admitting that it was never your fault. They can't handle the truth that you saw them without disguise and loved them anyway. So they rewrite the story. They turn you into the problem, call you clingy, accuse you of overreacting, tell others you were too intense. Because if they can make you the reason, they don't have to look at themselves. Disappearing becomes their protection. Silence becomes their weapon. They ghost, not because they don't feel, but because feeling terrifies them. They grew up learning that love ends in loss, that closeness equals danger, that vulnerability means pain. So they reenact it again and again. They create connection just to destroy it, because destruction feels safer than uncertainty. But here's what they don't realize. You were never chasing them. You were chasing the version of them that you met in the mirror, and that version only existed because of you. It's hard to accept, but sometimes love isn't lost. It was never owned. You were holding on to potential, not presence, to fantasy, not foundation. And when they disappeared, they didn't take love with them. They took illusion. The reflection faded, but your light stayed. You might feel broken now, questioning everything, thinking you did something wrong. But pain isn't proof of failure. It's proof of feeling. And only those who can love deeply can hurt this much. You just gave love to someone who could only reflect it, not receive it. When they vanish, they go searching for silence, but they never find peace, because peace requires presence, and presence requires truth. So they repeat, new faces, new mirrors, same emptiness. They keep running, from the one person they can't escape themselves. You, on the other hand, will heal because your pain has meaning, because you face it. You ask the hard questions. You sit in the silence. You rebuild. That's what makes you different. You don't disappear. You transform. And one day, you'll see it clearly. They weren't your forever. They were your reflection point. They showed you where you still overgave, where you confused intensity with intimacy, where you believed mirroring was the same as matching. They mirrored your light, but they also revealed where your boundaries blurred. So when you start missing them, remember this: you don't miss them. You miss the way you felt when you saw your own reflection in their eyes. You miss being seen, heard, understood. But now, you can give that to yourself without disappearing in the process. You're not hard to love. You were just trying to love someone who doesn't know how to stay loved. And their silence is not your rejection, it's their repetition. Their absence is not your punishment, it's their pattern. They'll keep mirroring until someone finally refuses to chase the reflection. And that's where healing begins. Not when they come back, but when you stop waiting for them to. You stop checking your phone. You stop replaying their messages. You stop rewriting endings that were never yours to fix. At first, it's not peace, it's shock, because silence from someone who mirrored your soul feels like death. But that silence isn't emptiness, it's information. It's your nervous system finally catching up to what your heart didn't want to see. You start noticing patterns, not just theirs, yours. The way you overexplain, the way you wait for closure, the way you chase clarity from people who thrive in confusion. You realize you weren't addicted to them. You were addicted to the feeling of being understood, even if it was a lie. That's the wound, the craving to be seen, to be mirrored, to be met. And that's why their reflection felt like destiny, because it filled a space you didn't know was empty. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. You realize you've been looking for mirrors instead of windows. Mirrors show you yourself. Windows show you the world. Mirrors keep you trapped in recognition. Windows invite you into reality. That's what awakening is. Learning the difference between being seen and being safe. You start to understand that chemistry isn't compatibility. That depth isn't danger. That love shouldn't require rescue. You begin to see that not everyone who mirrors your pain can meet your peace. At first, you'll want to warn others. You'll want to explain what happened. You'll want justice. But then, something shifts. You stop needing them to get it. You stop needing them at all. Because the more you heal, the more you realize it was never personal. They didn't do it to you. They did it again. And you just happened to be the one who cared enough to notice. Healing begins when you stop taking their behavior as proof of your worth. Their silence is not your shame. Their withdrawal is not your weakness. Their pattern is not your punishment. And slowly, you come home to yourself. The mirror fades. The illusion breaks. The reflection disappears. But you remain. You, the light they borrowed, the energy they fed on, the calm they tried to imitate. You, the constant. That's what they never understood. They thought your love was control. They thought your care was expectation. They thought your patience was weakness. But what they called weakness was strength without defense, love without agenda, presence without performance. They couldn't stay because they couldn't match that. You begin to realize you were never too much. They were simply too little for what you offered. They wanted reflection, not relationship, imitation, not intimacy. And you were never built to live inside someone else's fear. That's the turning point. When you stop asking, how could they leave me? And start asking, why did I keep trying to make them stay? Because that's where your power returns. In the space between what you wanted and what you tolerated, you start moving differently. No more explaining your worth. No more shrinking your needs. No more chasing reflections. You choose presence over performance, reality over fantasy, peace over patterns. And that choice breaks the cycle. Because the truth is, you can't heal in mirrors. You can only heal in light. The mirror shows what's missing. The light reveals what's whole. And as you step into it, you realize something profound. You were never the broken one. You were the awakening one. You stop looking back, not because you've forgotten, but because you've learned. You see their name and feel nothing. You remember the story without reliving it. That's not indifference. That's freedom. You start meeting people who don't mirror you. They meet you. No rush, no chaos, no intensity dressed as love. Just calm, real, steady. And for the first time, it feels strange, almost boring, because peace feels foreign after a lifetime of chaos. But peace is where love grows. That's how you know you've healed. When the familiar no longer feels safe, and the safe finally feels right. You no longer need mirrors. You become one. But this time, your reflection isn't survival. It's truth. You reflect wholeness, self-respect, boundaries, peace, the kind of energy that can't be manipulated because it no longer seeks validation. You've learned that love doesn't disappear. It transforms, and yours has turned inward. When you pull your energy back, the air changes. You don't chase. You don't explain. You don't beg to be seen. You just stop. And silence, for the first time, isn't punishment. It's protection. That's when they feel it. The void, the space your presence used to fill. They go searching for it, scrolling through your pages, checking who you've become, because mirrors need light, and you've stopped shining on them. They remember your calm, your laughter, the way you made chaos feel like safety, and it hits them. You weren't just supply, you were grounding. They confused love with control, connection with reflection. But now that you're gone, they see the difference. They might reach out, a message, a memory, a hey, how have you been? But it's not love, it's loss management. They're not coming back because they've changed. They're coming back because you stopped reflecting them. They want access to the mirror, not the truth. But this time, you see it. You recognize the pattern, disguised as progress. You feel the hook behind the softness, and you breathe. You don't respond in fire. You respond in silence. Because silence, now, is self-respect. You start realizing that your absence teaches louder than your words ever could. When you leave, you don't just take your love. You take their reflection, and what they're left with is themselves. The emptiness they've been running from stares back at them, and for a moment, they remember what real felt like. But you're not their healer. Not anymore. You've done your part. You held up the mirror, showed them who they could be, what they could feel, what love could look like. They just weren't ready. And that's not your burden. Healing doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop trying to save people who enjoy their drowning. It means you stop confusing their silence with depth. You stop romanticizing potential. You start respecting patterns. You realize that love without growth is just repetition, and you're done repeating because you've learned. Love shouldn't feel like recovery. It should feel like rest. So you rest. You rest in your truth, in your peace, in your new quiet. And in that quiet, something changes. The ache turns to clarity. The longing turns to gratitude. The story turns to strength. You stop looking for mirrors. You start looking for matches. People who don't imitate your energy, they meet it. People who don't perform love, they practice it. People who don't fear your depth, they breathe in it. That's what you deserve. Not the echo of affection, but the experience of it. And maybe one day, they'll think of you. They'll remember the way you made them feel real. They'll wonder why no one else feels like that. But you'll be gone, not out of bitterness, but evolution. You'll be somewhere that doesn't require shrinking, somewhere your love doesn't feel like labor, somewhere your peace isn't a threat. That's when it hits you. You were never too much. You were always the mirror that showed people their potential. But now, you're reflecting your own, and nothing feels better than that. The same light they tried to copy now guides your way forward. The same empathy they used against you now becomes your superpower. Because when you love yourself, the way you tried to love them, everything changes. You stop attracting takers and start recognizing equals. You stop begging for closure and start creating peace. You stop surviving love and start living it. That's when you finally understand. You didn't lose them. You found you. They mirrored your beauty, but they could never carry it. And now, you do. You wake up one morning and realize you haven't thought of them in days. No ache, no sting, just calm. You scroll through old memories, and it feels like a dream you've already woken from. That's healing, not fireworks, just stillness. You start noticing how heavy it used to feel, the anxiety of waiting, the confusion of mixed signals, the endless wondering what you did wrong. And now, you're simply not available for it. Not because you're hardened, but because you're whole. Peace feels strange at first. It's quiet, uneventful, unfamiliar, but it's yours. You built it. From every tear, every unanswered message, every version of yourself you had to bury to make someone else comfortable. You've finally reclaimed you. You start smiling for no reason. Not because anyone's watching, but because you're finally safe inside yourself. That's what they could never give you. Safety, because they never had it. But you do now. And that changes everything. You stop needing closure, because you've learned. Some stories don't end with explanation. They end with understanding. You stop asking, why did they do this to me? And start whispering, what did this teach me? And what it taught you is powerful. That love without self is just survival. That empathy without boundaries is exhaustion. That connection without truth is performance. You've lived it. You've learned it. You're done repeating it. Now, when someone mirrors you, you don't melt. You observe. You don't rush connection. You let it build. You let time reveal truth. Because real love doesn't rush to prove itself. It stays. It shows up. It grows. And as your light expands, you stop being the mirror and start being the example. You reflect peace, not pain, authenticity, not imitation, presence, not performance. You've become what you once searched for. So if you're watching this and you're in that stage where it still hurts, breathe. The reflection will fade. The ache will soften. And one day, you'll look back and thank the version of you who finally walked away. Because leaving wasn't the end. It was the beginning. They mirrored you because they saw your light. They disappeared because they couldn't hold it. But you never lost it. You were the real one all along. And now, it's your turn to stop chasing reflections and start creating radiance. Your love is too sacred to keep pouring into emptiness. Your energy is too pure to keep feeding performance. Save it for peace. Save it for purpose. Save it for you. If this spoke to you, don't just let it end here. Write it in the comments. I choose peace over patterns. Let it be your declaration. Let it be your release. Let it be your reminder that your light was never meant to be borrowed. It was meant to be seen.